Well, welcome to our October Planet Possible MiniPod. I'm Niki Roach, and this is a monthly update where we react to current events in water, climate and nature. It's a mini-pod because it'll only take about 15 minutes of your time, and it means you get a Planet Possible episode every 2 weeks. And each mini-pod, I'm joined by an environmental expert guest who chooses 3 issues that are making the headlines, keeping you right up to date with what's happening around the world and where they see exciting possibilities. And this mini-pod, I'm joined by the founder and editor of the UK Water Report. That's a magazine that focuses on UK water policy, regulation and finance. And my guest is Karma Loveday. And we'll be talking about water security, both internationally and here in the UK, the use of smart meters for larger water users and who's getting them fastest. And we'll explore whether the UK government's water review is an opportunity to press reset on the water sector here in the UK. So a very warm welcome to the MiniPod, Karma.
Hi Niki, thanks for having me.
So tell me what's caught your eye around water security in the news.
So I've picked this issue because I do genuinely feel that water security isn't being given sufficient attention. There's far lower awareness of the challenges and issues than there is, for example, on sewage discharges. And I'm sure you've heard this figure before. The challenges are huge. We need 5 billion extra litres of water a day by 2050. So the news element is, there's a couple of things actually. So this week we've had the Environment Agency report on water company water resources performance out for 2023 to 4. Now it's been a wet year, so there's been no obvious problem, but the headline that has been pulled out by the EA is that 19% of water being put into supply is still being lost to leakage. The second element is the BSI Water Security and Solutions Indicator. And that's an international gauge, really, and it looks at 2 things. It looks at the level of water security challenge in a country and also how well countries are responding to that challenge with their solutions. And keeping it simple, low scores are good, and the UK scores high on both elements. This is a really, I think, pressing and serious issue, and it's not like nothing good is being done. We do have, I've been very impressed by the new regional water resource planning groups, for example. I think they've added really valuable layer to planning. There's activity on the supply side. So last month, shovels in the ground at Havant Thicket, which is the first reservoir to be built for 30 years. That's a real milestone. And obviously there's another kind of the rapid regulators collaboration are progressing a series of other strategic schemes as well. And on the demand side, we have got, for the first time, both household and non-household reduction targets. So there is good stuff happening. But I do think, if you're asking if there's a clear pathway to water security, I'd have to say no, I don't think there is. On the supply side, there are lots and lots of kind of planning and consenting obstacles in the path, potentially, of some of those really big schemes, let alone any kind of engineering or technical issue. On the demand side, I don't really think anyone has a clear idea of how we're going to get down to those required levels, and it's not helpful that only 60% of customers are metered in the country. There isn't any one body that sort of sits across all of this and is really responsible for every element of it. While I think you can call out things like leakage and isolation, and obviously they do need attention, I think really what we need is a more strategic approach to this whole area.
And I would imagine as well, with the housing development sort of targets that we've got here in the UK under the new Labour government, that only puts pressure, doesn't it, on the already stretched water resources that we're talking about.
There's lots of things actually. I mean, housing's a great example because clearly you cannot build those houses unless you have water supply and sufficient wastewater capacity. But a lot of other things on that growth agenda, if you think about it, clean energy, so hydrogen, nuclear, they have large water demand, food security, things like data centres. I don't know if you've probably talked about those before, but the kind of ambitions there, I don't really think that the water requirement has been really truly factored in. So absolutely.
So it sounds like something strategic is needed to pull all of that together from your perspective, Karma.
I think so. I think, more accountability, someone, I think, sitting over everything with whom the buck ultimately stops. We could build on the good work of the regional groups by bringing in some of those sectors that we've just talked about, so kind of factor in their requirements as well. Clearly, this will all need investment on both the supply side and the demand side. And on the latter, I think it would be super helpful if we could have a government-led water awareness and water efficiency campaign. I don't think there's any sort of sniff of that at the moment. Something of that magnitude, I think, to really put this on the radar would be very, very helpful.
Well, as usual, that's a really concise summary from you. Thank you. And you've pulled out some really big topics. I guess that takes us nicely into the second topic that you've chosen, which is around smart meters. So tell me what caught your eye there.
Yes, so they are linked, but I'm going from kind of macro to micro, I suppose, with this one. And this isn't something that's really top of the news, but I have to say, it is topical because it kind of is drawn out of the PR24 draft determination responses, so the spending programme effectively for the next 5 years for the water companies. As part of that programme, Ofwat has allowed 1.5 billion for around 10 million smart meters. That's fantastic. We've never had anything of that nature before, so that is great. But the only issue really is that there's a concern that larger customers could be left out of the smart meter rollout because of Ofwat's approach to calculating the cost allowances. And there are sort of two elements to that, really. So first of all, general underfunding risk, if we can put it that way. So the allowances are about 13% below what the water companies asked for. But that does mask quite a bit of variety. So some companies actually got more money than they'd asked for. The most extreme cut is about 59%. So, there's variety there. But actually, it's the second point that's probably the more pertinent, which is that the allowances have been derived using a benchmarking model that uses median costs. And essentially, it's going to cost a lot more than the median for medium and large meters to be replaced or upgraded with smart. They're complex, they can be quite disruptive. So the concern really is that wholesalers will prioritise the cheapest and easiest to install meters as a rational choice. So households and kind of domestic type user businesses would probably be prioritised above medium and large users who've got more complex, more expensive requirements. And to me, that's a big problem because it is really those large customers that offer the greatest water efficiency potential. If you've ever had Mosul on, I'm sure you have.
Not yet. That's a good shout. Right, Mosul, if you're listening, come and talk to us.
They would tell you from their data that 30% of all water put into the public supply is used by businesses. 72% of that consumption is accounted for by 13% of users that have got medium and large meters. So really, it seems perverse to me and it would be a massive lost opportunity if large meters were left out of the smart rollout due to cost and efficiency considerations, etc. And that point's been raised by a number of parties in their responses, by Mosul itself, by the strategic panel, which is like the highest group that oversees the non-household market, by the umbrella body for water retailers, and by customers as well.
What's reassuring is actually what you're saying is that actually it's the users that are asking for this as well. So there's a real pull for wanting better data about consumption. So it sounds like we just need Ofwat to hear and to think about that when they make their final decisions around future bills. So for your what's possible item, you're thinking about the UK government's water review. Tell me about the opportunity there for a reset.
Yes, so you asked me to think about what's possible. So I'm not saying it's probable, but we can hope. I suppose what I wanted to talk about was embracing the fact that we're going to have this review anyway as an opportunity to also try to achieve a bit of a reset. We've all probably become a bit used to this really negative public discourse now. It's quite sad for people that have worked in the industry a long time and have tried to do their best for that time. And actually, it's not reflective of the whole truth or the reality in many instances. And this was sort of brought home to me quite starkly recently. I went on a trip to Toronto where the International Water Association were holding their World Water Congress, something like 7,000 delegates from 105 countries. But it was a real breath of fresh air, actually, from the UK narrative of kind of fines and failures and sewage dumps and greed and so on. A lot of the issues here that are causing criticism are actually quite common challenges around the world. A great example of that was the American Waterworks Association put up a list in one of their sessions of like the top 15 water sector challenges in 2024, and that could have been written about the UK, and it could have been written probably about a lot of countries around the world. So it was things like catchment protection, financing, capital improvements, ageing infrastructure, long-term water supply availability, things that are really familiar here. On top of that, I think there are some challenges that are genuinely global challenges that no single company or country can really tackle alone. So thinking there about things like climate mitigation and adaptation, antimicrobial resistance, PFAS, they are global issues, not UK issues. And within that kind of heady mix of challenges, it did really strike me that the UK is actually doing quite well and is certainly quite respected on that global stage. So I think, people are probably familiar with we are tip top pretty much in drinking water quality, for example. But also, our regulatory system here, we discuss that a lot, don't we? I certainly do in the magazine. But actually, it's still very respected and emulated by a lot of countries. People want to learn from it still. I think companies here tend to be in the pack on things like leakage and things that you can kind of compare place to place. And we've got things to say about interesting things, about innovation, nature-based solutions. We have experience and we have things to sort of bring to the party, if you like. And I suppose even on wastewater, that's obviously the big profile, high profile issue here. Clearly there's room for improvement, but we do collect and treat virtually all our wastewater here, which isn't the case even in some European countries. I suppose what I'm trying to get to say is that I think something has sort of gone badly wrong really when the UK water sector is among those that are the envy of the professional world and yet are kind of, maligned and mistrusted at home. I think the kind of persistence of the negative narrative is not just unpleasant, but it's also, I think, quite dangerous. So if we're thinking about kind of trying to attract talent to the sector and bringing young people in, I know that's something you're passionate about. That's harder because of the negativity in the sector. But also, even kind of attracting investment. We have got the government water review coming up. They've announced that, and I think that will probably take about a year or something. I think it obviously will be a very thorough, in-depth review, and we'll drill down into the depths of how we reset regulation and other legislative approaches. But I think at a high level, we do need to look for a way to kind of get water onto a sounder reputational footing as a target outcome of that review, as well as those more kind of heavy duty things.
I would concur and add into that evidence and context are really important. So you objectively want the highest standards wherever you live, both environmental and water quality. And also it's important to remember the context and how you are performing. You've done that beautifully, actually, in reminding us that professionally the view might be very different to public perception. So, Karma, thank you so much for joining us. You've given us so much to think about in just 15 minutes. Unfortunately, that's all we've got time for. But you can hear more from Karma, certainly, in the UK Water Report, and we'll pop a link to that in the show notes, alongside some links to the stories that we've covered today if you want to find out a bit more. Thank you so much to you for joining us on the MiniPod. Subscribe to Planet Possible on your usual podcast player to never miss an episode, and we love to hear your ratings and reviews too. We've got more fantastic guests and topics lined up for the rest of this year, so I hope you'll join us for those. And all that leaves me to say is a huge thank you to my superb guest, Karma Loveday. Thank you, Karma.
Thank you, Niki.
That's it, everyone. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time.